3 people, and they have a card and they go round. One of them, we like them to speak to a recruitment company because we think things are changing so quickly that we don't even know about, and recruitment companies are so on it, they have to speak to one recruitment company. And then 2 other things, and they mark it, they put comments on what they got from it, what they didn't, and we should have been doing that again this week, but actually our pupils are joining the session tomorrow afternoon for the business session with 3 businesses. So I think that is really important, because they really don't, a lot of them, all they have in their head is, what degree am I going to do? Geography. What am I going to do after that? Another useful thing we have done is get our old Decanians back 5 or 6 years on and discover that actually they did a geography degree and now they're in banking or whatever, which is also because they don't see further than being 17 and what degree they're going to do and how they can end up doing something completely different. So I do think, and it will be included, I know, in the business show in November, the sort of, you know, students meet businesses.
I mean, I did a biology degree, then went and did chartered accountancy, and then worked in financial services for 4 years building systems. So,
they find that very difficult to imagine doing something else.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think.
So does that partly get in the way of them making a decision because they feel it's a little bit cast in stone?
Well, Eve, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. I think Jill, I think they're probably, I've noticed in the last 4 or 5 years, they're beginning to get a better sense that maybe careers are not as linear as they were, you know, and I was an engineer and now I'm in education. So absolutely. And I think the more people who are not mum and dad,
Yeah.
mum and dad kind of get wiser as they get older. Why is that? But they really benefit from hearing it from other people, even if they're told the same thing 10 times, actually good, because finally they will believe it. And I think this kind of encouragement to not limit yourself, don't be anxious, don't think that as soon as you've narrowed, you know, that's it. And either to make a change is to have failed to do this. Maybe you actually might change for good reason. I think lots of them would love to know what sort of qualities, rather than what specific knowledge and training, what qualities of person do employers really value or might value going forward, knowing that AI is coming along. You know, a lot of what we might have traditionally done or hired a person to do might, by the time they get there, have been increasingly being substituted out of the picture. Okay, so what's left for the humans? You know, what has the prize value by way of those personal qualities from an employer? What would bring value?
So one of the things I went to, was it last year? Down at the Forest of Dean campus was, I think, really aimed at the apprentices more than anything else, or apprenticeships more than anything else. But one of the guys who spoke was Adam, whoever his name is, from the LEP, who is also a futurist, and he was talking about the fact that the view is that doctors, lawyers, you know, a lot of these jobs go in the way that we know them currently, because actually computers are better at diagnosing this than doctors are, you know, with the right test. I think for some of the young people in the audience, that was a bit like, because they see all these jobs just disappearing, so what's left? So, you know, is some involvement from the students in maybe some futuristic type activities? Maybe is that something that would, I don't know how we do it. But
really, yeah, they might be even more scared, but I think it's also liberating, isn't it? It's also more messages about don't buy into a single story of what the future might be like. There are always options. You have options. You just have to inhabit the right mindset and be responsive to those. Take the opportunities. Be open-minded. And maybe be entrepreneurial, even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's those, you know.
How could the show most easily? What sort of thing could the show provide that would actually help that as a forum? And you know, this is great from you guys, but you know, would the students actually be up for really engaging with it? Because we don't want to spend a lot of time organising stuff for the show, and then, you know, you end up dragging and screaming 5 or 6 kids there, and they're not really, they didn't really want to come anyway. But
to build on what's already been said, you could quite easily do some kind of behaviour focused sort of event where you're gathering together potential businesses to come and talk about the variety of different behaviours that are needed within each business or each, you know, industry. to sort of present that way. Then they're getting an insight into the business, but also in terms of, you know, what behaviours they need to have, because like you say, it's no longer following we all talk about pathways, and there is an element of, you know, we need to provide a pathway, but you also have to make a decision at some point. And I think that's where students need to go. And I think there's a real danger with a lot of the webinars and things that I've been on recently, that we just display a doom and gloom.
Oh
You
God,
know, when you read lots of the percentages and
so many opportunities. I mean,
there's loads. I mean, you know, you look at the aging workforce, you look at you know, new jobs, new skills, AI, etc. has been mentioned already. I think it's about getting those students prepared behaviourally, and if they can see what that looks like in a particular business, they might think about careers in a different environment than they would have done. And I can only talk from our perspective at Hartpury, from an agri-tech perspective, where over half of our students at the university in agriculture are now from non-farming backgrounds.
oh really?
And that is because of the, you know, the agri-tech piece. So they are not, you know, knee deep in mud or, you know, hand deep in whatever else. And that's what students, I think, need to hear from real businesses, rather than it, you know, necessarily being a careers team saying, you know, this is the best advice to give you.
I remember going to careers advisor when I was at school, and I actually wanted to be a vet, and then she asked me what I was good at, and I think I ended up being a town and country planner was her plan. I mean, that wasn't what happened, but it was very much a box ticking exercise, and therefore the answer was, you know, and it was, I mean, it was a lot of years ago now, but
yeah, don't get me wrong, there's still some of that is valid though, because obviously if you are, you know, wanting to become a vet, then there is a certain pathway that you do need to follow, and qualifications you do need to gain, etc. And you can replicate that across other industries. But there are others that start to go a bit on the lattice sort of front, and you can jump across rather than sort of up and down.
Julie, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm just building on what Simon was saying. A lot of young people don't know the route. So we think we know the route, and the routes have been very traditional in the past, but it's about those behaviours and transferable skills and where you end up. And you can go, as you've demonstrated, Jill, into a very meandering route to what you're currently doing now. And I think for young people to hear from senior people that have perhaps taken a route that hasn't been what we consider traditional, and what they've learned as they've moved in each stage of their career, and what those softer skills, if you like, or the transferable skills or the behaviours, how they have helped them.
Do you think there's also, I mean, because obviously, you know, a 17-year-old meeting me is going to feel, you know, obviously look at Methuselah and wonder what on earth I've got that's even vaguely relevant to what their lives these days. Do we not need some, I mean, because a lot of the sole traders around the businesses have been around a while, because it's probably our second or third or even fourth manifestations. Do you think we need some sort of 30, 35, 40-year-old business owners to make sure we're actually hitting a generation that's maybe they can maybe relate to a little?
Absolutely. I think you need a wide, I think you need a really wide range. So whether there are perhaps some more local people that they may know, as well as, and you can get people outside of the county that have taken those routes. And I think that's really important.
There could also be some really good graduate stories as well, and I don't just mean university graduates. I mean, you know, perhaps apprenticeship graduates that have gone on to different things and follow different routes to get there. There must be some lovely stories in Gloucestershire.
Well, I know when we did the where they had this event down at Forest Dean, they did have 3 apprenticeships there, and one of the apprentices there who would obviously finish their apprenticeships. But one of them was a lady who, I think, did she work at she worked at one of the local small engineering companies, and she was now, you know, basically a senior director. You know, but she come the apprenticeship route. So she had a really good story to tell.
And I think the key to the route, if you're going to attract a wide range of students, is to have those stories from someone that perhaps entered the labour market at 16, somebody at 18, and then somebody from the graduate route, to show that full range and their different pathways. If it helps, certainly apprenticeships have been on a sort of revolution in the last 5 years, and there are around 400 different apprenticeship standards, ranging right up to master's level, a lot of them now with degrees. And within each of those standards, they set out not only the knowledge and skills that an individual will achieve, but also the behaviours.
All right.
And that's a separate section within a two-page document, which is really interesting.
So in terms of engaging the students, though, do you think it would be, is it going to be better for it to be more an interrogative type panel or forum, or
I wonder, we were talking about soft skills, and actually recently I've been on a networking thing where we were talking about how important the softer skills are. And actually it was a lady that runs a recruitment company, and she was saying, you know, people are putting it on their CVs much more now that they have the softer skills. And I wonder if something like at the end of one of the days of the business show, we did a sort of networking thing. So people have a glass of something. Again, they've got to talk to so many businesses. And then we have someone on the stage, two or three people on the stage that give a short 5 minutes of where they are, where they were at 17 and where they are now. And it could be a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old. But before that, they have to, if we choose, I don't know, 5 or 6 from each school, and they've got to turn up, they're not going to know anyone. They've got to actually go up and talk to people as you would at a networking meeting, because again, we've had business people come and do some Zoom things in the last few weeks. And one of the guys who's got a web company, he said to our students, you have got to get out there and you've got to get used to talking to people on that kind of level. It's so important.
At the meeting that we went to, the show that we went to for apprenticeships at the Cheltenham racetrack last year, and it's been done in September time. One of the things that the pupils really enjoyed, there was, I can't remember exactly if it was Whitbread or someone like that, and they had a really simple setup in which someone had to pour a drink. And it was very, very clever because everyone had a go. It was a bit of a laugh. It was always a bit fizzy and such things. But while they were doing that, they were talking to them and saying, you know, if something's going badly, how would you put the customer at ease? And the people that were doing it, and so it was a very simple activity, but actually it gained an awful lot out of it. They were learning again those soft skills, or having an example of what it could be like, and how even doing what some of them would regard as a very simple task of just pouring drinks actually needs skills, needs talent, needs, you know, confidence, needs all sorts of things that are within that, even on the most basic level. And that was a big realization for many of them. So anything along those lines that could be done would be very helpful.
Something practical. It was Miller and Butler.
Right.
Yeah.
Owned pubs, anyway, lots of them.
I don't drink.
So, as I say, the four things that sort of are available at the moment is the motivation of the young generation, which is I think is a panel discussion. I'm not sure how that's going to run at the November show. Pete can probably tell us a bit more about that. There is the Student Meets Business, which is the groups of students actually having a chat with businesses, you know, and find. The only thing we found, I did it, was it last year? I can't remember which school it was that came, but the students were supposed to have prepared some questions, and they clearly hadn't. And there was a little bit of a feeling that they were there because they had to be there, rather than they were there because they actually had some real curiosity about finding out some things that would help them, you know, either in their career choices or actually in their soft skills and stuff. So, you know, we can, from a business point of view, we can sit at the table and talk to them, but you know, we found we were having to drive the conversation, which is really actually, look, there was this opportunity. Come on, guys, you know, you need to seize the opportunity. I
think it's being really clear as to what the student target audience is, I think, and making sure then if it's an invite, what year group or, you know, student groups.
I still don't do years, because it doesn't mean it's me. We did have a couple of Hartbury people actually, so that was chalk and cheese. I mean, because they were doing their masters, so they were just in a completely different place. They were the main students they weren't taking their A levels that year. That they would have been taking their A levels the next year.
12.
Yeah, that makes sense. To me, they're lower 6.
And actually, year 12 in November is a good time.
Okay. So they should have been thinking, I would have thought they were at that place when they were starting to think about, there were a couple of them that were like, you'd hire them straight away because they were just they were on it. But there were also a lot of them that were, there was one of the girls said she'd actually realised she'd chosen completely the wrong A-levels, which worried really. Which is a bit scary. So the student means business, there is the Dragon's Den piece, which as well is pitching to Des Coates-Oliver and Tom Beasley, and Des is a bit of an entrepreneur, so if the idea actually does have any merit, then it's likely to actually get some real, become real, which would be really good. And then there's things like the Employment and Skills Forum in terms of thinking about, which is a bit more what we've been talking about, I think, in terms of what sort of skills and things and knowledge can we position the show to start helping the students to start pulling out and getting some experience of. I quite like the networking idea though. I think that's
could do it at the end of one of the days, couldn't we, and then have
how would that work from the school's point of view in terms of the children though, because obviously there are logistics around having the students at the show. I guess it has to fit with timetables and stuff, does it? Or do they go to school?
I mean, Jill, I'd love to just ask my fellow panelists what they think, but we're in the middle at the moment of going through all of the planning for the full reopening of the campus with the 2-meter ruler everywhere. Let's just leave it at that. I mean, it is just a nightmare. Nightmare is an inadequate word. It is beyond a nightmare. Really, really difficult. And one of the things that all our schools will have to do for everything is whatever we had pre-COVID, which was very, very, it's same old risk assessments. Everybody knows what they're doing. The risk assessments have now got to be signed off on by the governors, so that if there's some awful corporate manslaughter case because of failure to PP and somebody's died, they know who to point the finger at. So my governing board is in overdrive. I mean, the first thing is they're all at home and they're all on screen. So we've had more input from them than ever before in the last 6 weeks. I can't even, again, possible to exaggerate the difference. But one of the things that was just occurring to me as we were talking about, because I'm visualizing these great ideas and format and so on, that how much of that still works in the post-COVID constraints, because we might find that we struggle to be able to take kids off site in the same way.
Right.
We might have said, put them in a minibus. Well, hang on, how close are the seats in the minibus? Minibus 18, normally 18, but it's a bit cozy on the back row. What's your off-site guarantees? If we have to go to these enormous, almost strangulated lengths to be able to run the campus well and achieve some kind of normality and rhythm, at what point off-site trips are going to be
that's a good point.
allowed or signed off on. And so I was this is a bit radical, it's a bit out there, so it might be in the crazy category, but is there any way of harnessing the incredible expertise that will be at the show? Do you have a sort of booth, like a sound booth, that businesses can go into and do a kind of vox pop to camera, where you build up a library, a virtual library of, here's some tips from the accountants, here's what the insurance firms would be looking for, here's what we really are top 3 things. Is there like a page of simple questions 1 to 5 that you get lots and lots of different employers to answer as you're going around the show, or that they come to the booth and it gets recorded, and then you could push that out to all the schools, everybody. All the secondary schools in Cheltenham alone, there's about 15 schools.
I just thought of a slightly different take on that, actually, because I think that's a really, and we could do that either at the show, or that could be done actually not.
It could be done in advance. It could be done anytime, actually.
Between now and November. But thinking about the fact, we're doing this live stuff from Dean Close at the moment, which is, it's very small panels, socially distanced, full production team being live streamed out on YouTube, could be live streamed out on Facebook, is what if rather than a business going in and just answering some bog standard questions, what about if it was done with with the children potentially, the students potentially being at school or even at home, and actually interviewing somebody across those sorts of mechanisms. So it's a bit more of a two-way thing.
Yeah.
Live streamed or something.
I mean, Jill, I'm just wondering also in terms of their confidence levels, you know, if they're quite shy and just feeding back off your observations from what might, if they haven't got their questions ready, their confidence levels may be greatest when they're in a familiar environment. They're not taking in all this like amazing stuff all around them, and they're just in risk aversion mode, you know, or they're not sure it'd be embarrassing or etc. So the things like the staff-student ratios of supervision, which we always have to have, those might be met more easily if you can keep the kids on campus. And then
if you do
have a live hookup.
Yeah, if you do more of an interview style, and if the student doing the interviewing doesn't want to be on camera, they probably don't have to be on camera. They could probably just be, well, like I'm talking to you now, I just wouldn't have a camera, you know, it would just be one of those.
Yes, or even in the chat bar, you know, if there was an option that they could type it and then their questions could still then be answered. I wonder whether that would, it would protect your plan from it getting scuppered by the Boris's latest announcement 3 days before about lockdown, you know, and we've got to all change everything again. I don't know. I don't want to crowd out the opportunities for students to come, because I know the buzz of everything is also really valuable, but I wonder whether this particular year it would be the safest thing to...
Somebody else think in terms of what they think the logistics might be by, I mean, we haven't got a crystal ball, but...
Plan A should be a virtual plan. Plan B should be a physical plan.
Do it that way around, yeah?
Yeah,
Simon,
unfortunately.
I agree. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that entirely. And it's we've just been running over the last few days for some of our upper sixth leavers, alumni coming back, doing meetings like this, talking about the career areas that they are in. So we just had one earlier on, literally before this meeting, on personal data, cyber, national security.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because we've got 2 or 3 of our former students in those areas. And people engaged, they can switch their cameras off if they don't want to be seen, but they can hear. And it was a really good session. And I think we've learned quite a lot from the online sessions that are taking place, just how communicative and effective they can be in reaching more people, because you haven't got to travel to the place. I entirely concur with Eve. I think it's going to be such a minefield for us even getting people across from one part of town to another, let alone around the country and all that sort of thing. I'd agree, plan A online, absolutely. Let's hope we can have plan B and a bit more face-to-face, but plan A online does work.
Okay. That's good to know, actually. Okay. But it does sound, from what you guys are saying, what it sounds like would really help you, and what you would most engage with, and what the students would most engage with, is this concept of different people talking about their experiences and really trying to relate that to, you know, year 12s and the choices they might be making, but also hopefully opening up their eyes to the fact that there are huge numbers of different opportunities these days. I'm not sure, Julie, whether it was you were saying to me the other day that, you know, some of the legal firms now are looking at, actually they're not really interested in the students going off to university and doing law. They want them to come and do, I guess, more of an apprenticeship, actually more of an old articles type type scenario, way back. I mean, I did articles when I did my chartered accountancy, because you learn on the job, you know, and you don't come with any preconceived ideas, and you also don't come with over expectations about quite how valuable you're going to be on day one, because you're probably not going to be, really, let's face it.
They want to train you their way. They don't want you to have gone and done accountancy or even law sometimes. They want you and at 18 fresh, and they want to train you their way. I heard it at St James's. We went to St James's place, and there were a couple of guys there who said, you know, because if you go and do a media degree or whatever, and then you decide you can't get a job in media, so you end up going back to accountancy or whatever, they would much rather have you at 18.
Right, really.
I think what a lot of the employers will say is that they are more likely to retain you. So if you have taken somebody, so say to become a chartered accountant, you will take around 5 years with someone like Hazelwood's to follow that apprenticeship route. and the retention post qualification is that much higher from people that have followed the apprenticeship route than perhaps those graduates that come in and then retrain, and that's why quite a lot of them want to. And there are so many standards now where you can become a policeman, you could become a teacher, you could become a quantity surveyor. So there are lots of embedded degree programs within these apprenticeship routes, but it isn't right for everybody. I've got a son and a daughter, and I've had one follow one route and one follow the other for very good reasons, and it's really important that the business show shows both of those routes, all of the routes that you can. And the one thing I did wonder was quite a lot of time employers say to me that the applicants or the people interested aren't particularly well prepared, and perhaps not from your schools but schools wider in the county. And I wondered whether there was something around for perhaps the careers advisors across the county, some activities that employers could share that would be good preparation activities.
Well, it might be something for the recruitment companies as well, mightn't it, really?
Yeah, something around problem solving. I certainly know that some accountancy firms, you turn up and you think that you're just there for an open evening, and to find out a little bit more, and they're actually asked to do a group presentation, and they're not expecting
when I worked for JP Morgan, I was heavily involved in the graduate recruitment, which, I mean, we did change the process every year, but it wasn't only an interview. They had to do joint business plans with people they never met. They had to solve problems. Some of them were practical, physical problems.
Yeah.
And one of the things that a lot of the students didn't realise was they were actually being interviewed all day. So even when it was casual conversations at lunch, they were actually being assessed. And you could see there were a couple of them that hadn't really quite got that bit.
Really, that would only work in Plan B.
Yes,
Wouldn't it?
Well, we could. I mean, I suppose we could do something maybe virtually. But I see Peter's joined us.
It's not actually. Sorry, I didn't mean for them actually to do it. I just thought that maybe some employers, following on Eve's idea around the Vox Pox, could say actually this is a really good exercise, a good problem-solving exercise for you to do in groups of 4. If only to be interviewed by a black screen that so many graduates get to know so well nowadays, even before you get through the early stages.
Yeah, that's interesting actually.
There was one other thing, just moving on from that as well, and it would be as much of a benefit for people like myself in the careers business. We've just finished doing one-to-ones with just about everyone in our lower 6th and chatting away, and one of the things that came out about the choices of those people that choose to go to university. They say, I want to do another 3 years of education. This is the route I'm going to do. But obviously thinking at the end, they want to have a degree that is in their mind worth something. And we find this quite a lot of the time where particularly our friends, the parents, have said, well, you know, when I was at university 30 years ago, that was a very poorly regarded degree, or that place isn't very good, or, you know, it's got to be a Russell group, or that kind of interaction that we conversation rather that we had with our pupils. And there are a number of subjects, so for instance combined honours and things like liberal arts, that as far as I'm concerned have got very, very good departments and very well regarded by certain areas. There are still seemingly some areas of business who didn't necessarily regard them as being as strong a degree as something else, and some kind of feedback from companies on that I think would be very useful for the pupils as well. As it frustrates me terribly when I talk to someone in business who says, well, we wouldn't think of taking anyone who wasn't from a Russell group or something like this, which always seems to me to be very narrow-minded and slightly odd looking at things. But I
suppose one of the challenges is that for some of the larger companies, I'm guessing that a lot of their initial graduate sort is actually done automatically and automatically scored.
Right.
So we, JP, I mean, this is a lot of years ago now, and it was a fairly heavily automated blend. We used to get 3,000 applications for 100 places, and the first paper sort was actually a completely objective score, and so it did take into account It didn't take into account so much degree subject, but it did take into account who the awarder of the degree was.
Right.
But whether that's still true, I have no idea. So that would be something quite interesting to
Or
know.
how they would judge that as well, because, you know, the way in which it looks, I mean, just today they had the universities' rankings of the world were in there, and the UK took a bit of a hit on that one. And that will have a knock-on effect with things. But, particularly when also we have overseas students that might come to something like this because they might choose to want to do some for their degree in the United Kingdom, but then also maybe stay on and get some work experience. Knowledge of what is seen as a good institution and a good degree, just as a general thing. It may well be that different economies have completely different on those things. But I think any kind of feedback on that would be very useful indeed.
Okay. So Pete, are you on the call now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely. So it's just been interesting. So apologies I'm being late, everybody. I've just been getting one of the live streams going at the Dean Close, but I'm en route home now. I think it's really been interesting just to hear what everybody's been saying there. I think what we have to do from the show's perspective, I mean, the reason we wanted to bring this group of people together is because we recognise we have a moment in time when we do a show where we are engaging with the business audience and putting it together, and we have an opportunity to grab their ear, but we have to do that in the right way. We have to do it in a way that is going to mean something to businesses and that is going to add value to businesses. Now, we all know that there is a skills gap agenda across a number of sectors and skills at the moment, so there is no doubt that the ability to get the people's ear is right if we can work out the language. And hearing what you're saying about the feedback and understanding the relative positions between the education establishments and the businesses is absolutely core territory. So we have three constituent groups who we would potentially be building something for. One is the business community. One is the teachers, lecturers and professionals involved in careers and apprenticeships and actually bringing the young people through. And then the third is the young people themselves. So what we know is the initial sentiment from business when we get young people involved in things is really, really positive. And if you're looking for what we will loosely call a selling point on what we're talking about here, getting young people engaged in a positive way goes down really well with business people. So I think the question I would put out then is how can the show present it? You know, what can we do? If there's a thing that we can put together to get the teaching community together, what is it? And we're very happy to invest time and energy. We've got a lot of very widespread connections, so we're really happy to bring those to bear and get those players in. If we're going to do that, we need to have committed buy-in for participation from that community of teachers and lecturers and professionals, and we recognise it's a very overstretched, under-resourced area. It's very operational, and we're not dealing with a sector of people who, by their nature, would be doing that sort of business networking thing. So one of the problems we've been up against in recent years is actually getting the buy-in from the professionals, because I'm not a teaching professional, and the people doing the show aren't teaching professionals. So we can't do this unless it is a community of those professionals who are really guiding it, helping it and leading it, and then we can start putting stuff together that hopefully will design to have an attraction for the businesses as well. So that really sums up why we were doing this. Yes.
So Pete, let me just regroup cap on a little bit on the other pieces that we've really discussed, because we did actually get started earlier, so we are further ahead than we think we are, because everybody was very much on time, which was very impressive. Is the thing and I'll tell me if I've misunderstood any of this, guys, is really one of the things that the panel feel is really important from the students' point of view is really starting to get some exposure to the behaviours that are really needed in terms of, you know, either running your own business or being in potential careers, because it's not just about the skills and knowledge, you know, and how we might do that. And Eve had a really, I mean, there seems to be a general consensus that the chances of getting a whole group of students physically to the show, even in November, is probably not where we should be planning.
Okay.
The feeling is that plan A should be some virtual stuff. So whether we can live stream from the show, whether we can do, I mean, Eve had a nice idea about like an interview booth, you know, where a business would go in and be interviewed by, I guess, one or more students, obviously with a facilitator there. That should probably be plan A, and plan B should be physically that actually we probably can do something actually at the town hall, because Eve was explaining that the machinations that are having to be gone through in terms of even trying to work out how they're going to get children on campus, let alone get them somewhere else, and how they is proving to be challenging. I think you would agree, Eve, wouldn't you?
Yeah, like we never imagined, Jill. Like we never imagined.
So I think part of this is how we do some virtual stuff that still has value for the business and the students.
So is that comment specifically about the COVID agenda, or a bigger, wider comment about life in general?
Well, it's really the COVID agenda, isn't it, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, I would say COVID, but it would be interesting to see how much agility that we gain almost as a side effect of having to deal with COVID. We kind of get more agile, we get more streamlined, and I think this idea of being able to push something out sort of live from the show gives that sense of excitement that this is live, this is business, it's buzzy, it's happening. But if you think of the pupils be almost like sort of the fish on the hook, you know, we're trying to reel them into the adult world where they're more at ease, they do speak out, they don't think any question is too stupid to ask. And I don't know if my colleagues would say this, I'm probably overstating it slightly, but I think sometimes they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes the lack of questions isn't because they're, you know, tongue-tied or useless or inert. It's that there's this complete clash of worlds where the world they've been in, which is their school and their family and their mates, they're now not just watching The Apprentice on telly, you know, they're actually amongst people in the hubbub and the buzz of the business world, which is kind of, they want to be in that world, but they don't have a language, they don't have the lexicon, they don't yet know what to ask. So here's my other completely lunatic idea of a format, which I'm sure everyone can knock the sharp edges off this one, but I just had in my mind this vision. One is of a role play, and I mean, you don't have to say the words role play and my toes are curling, you know, I mean, you know, role play is like, role play. But with this amount of lead time between now and November, we might get somebody, you know, people who are willing, maybe just one or two, to either demo what is a really, crap interview. You know, what is poor, and then what is like, okay, and then what is like, you've nailed it. And the ideal would be the same person doing 3 different versions of that interview off their CV. So, you know, we've got drama teachers, we've got staff. I mean, I'll volunteer myself. You know, I have done some appalling interviewing in the past where I have said some stupid thing. I mean, I have kept I've got a folder of all the rejection letters I've had from jobs in my life, and it is, you know, my mother raised me to have my feet on the ground and head's never too big, so I read these occasionally just to make sure that I remember. You know, I was totally just useless. So, you know, I think kids often, they have this fear that it's got to be perfect, they've got to get the right answer, they have to know. And we know everybody's a bit raw and rough and ready when they're 16, 17, 18, 19. And nobody's the finished article, but employers and recruitment agents particularly, you're looking for potential. You think, is this person coachable? Is this person someone who's going to respond to the training I can give them? I just need them to have the raw materials. Okay, better for me that they're plug and play, but that sometimes comes at a cost of salary. But can I actually get this person and they can become better for me in my business environment? So, you know, that I think, speaking just from the years I taught economics for 18 years, you know, kids who sit in lessons often, they don't want to look embarrassed and stupid in front of their mates, but once they see something, they get it, and the point has hit home. So role play is, and I'll offer myself. I can't do it live on the day, but if you want to like hire me for some practice runs, no problem. The other version of that could be that somebody really brave or David, maybe one of our recent leavers would be willing to do this, you know, a recent graduate or somebody who's in the job market at the moment, who's in CV writing mode, to actually be interviewed and then have 2 or 3 businesses on a panel critiquing that interview. And what might emerge is that people see that interview in different ways.
Which they will. Which they
will.
Yeah,
and therefore, those children are now realising there is no one right answer. When you're in a maths class, there is only one right answer. So often in school, that's what the assessment criteria are. That's how you get an A star. That's the answer. Guess what, people? This is a different set of paradigms. And maybe if they could hear that and see that as a response live, I don't know, just maybe there's the idea of germ of an idea there. I don't know what colleagues think.
So like the Vox Pop idea, Eve also said, when we were talking about, you know, difficult to get the kids in, was members of your networking group or whatever, they go into a box and they literally give you 5 best things about being an accountant or 5 things we're looking for in law, you know, and so it's quick moving and you could put all those into a film and the kids would love that, you know, short and sharp, and because they like that.
Can I just lob a couple of questions in about stuff that Eve was saying there, also observations. One thing we know and we're constantly looking at is that the differential between the online, what we're doing now on Zoom, and meeting people, obviously you're taking the body language and the live experience on the ground out. Now, just a question on the back of what Eve was saying there, because all of the things that Eve has suggested there are very doable in different ways, and we can talk in a little bit deeper way about how and what we can do with those. But I can see a scenario thinking about the young people and using that comment, you know, they don't know what they don't know, and the barriers. Running some stuff online with a restricted, shall we say, level of body language and close, you know, understanding face to face. I could see that could either be a positive or a negative. It could be a positive in the sense that it maybe stops a full sense of exposure, which might put people off. Flip side of coin is you also talked there, Eve, about, you know, being in the buzz of with the businesses and things, and you won't get that so much online as you would if you were physically with those guys, having those conversations in the room, and all the follow through language that you don't always get because you can't talk over people. Now, these are not mutually exclusive. I think following what we've done what we're doing here for Business Insights, there are quite a number of possible options that we could throw up. But I'm wondering what permutation of communication would fit. I mean, obviously there's a mechanical issue about moving people around the place. I absolutely get that. And whether we talk about COVID or post-COVID, when it is actually all of faint history, that will still be an issue. And the Ladies' College obviously is proximately fairly near to the town hall. So, you know, someone who's coming in from a long way off would have an even bigger problem. So that stuff we need to work through. And as I said, it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. But we would certainly be able to create space and capacity for stage presentation, for role play. There's either an opportunity here for schools who understand what they're trying to achieve through that role play to establish something, and what we would then do is present space for it to happen in and introduce the business audience, or even there's an opportunity here to talk to the theatres and to get them involved, whether it's Bacon, Everyman Playhouse, because if we start moving into role play and things like that, then having some professional actors involved in this gives it another dimension. So these are all really good questions, but we need drivers and we need to get an understanding of what the way forward is, if that makes sense.
Pete, I guess, you know, is that I wonder whether there's sort of the 2 phases really. because as you rightly say, we're looking at some formats that might endure past COVID, or we're saying actually from where you are now, even without COVID, what would this space look like in terms of this educational stakeholder partnership, and what formats are going to work better, and actually what outcomes do you want? And I think what I've really learned from Jill and everyone else's inputs at the moment is ideally you want a win-win-win.
Yes.
You want everybody to get something positive out of it.
Yeah.
So any format for this particular construct, which is a win-lose or a win-0, not much, is not probably going to have the legs to be something that you want to kind of every year makes it onto your list to be repeated. So it's refining those concepts, isn't it? Talking to I've just had to hire a new head of drama person, and they worked in the Arts Council, and they said, anecdotally, they said there's so many actors, at the moment out of work, basically. Yeah. So in a way, we could use this year as a year to test a lot of stuff that would be a bit fringe and a bit like out there in a normal year, and then inform what you take on going forward if in future actually we don't need to be quite so so radical. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think what I've always done, talking down the years with music tours or festivals, which is a bit of my background, what I always said is, when you start the conversation about the vision for this, don't, whatever you do, let yourself be encumbered in the first sentences by the restrictions you have, be that budget, in our case COVID, because if you do that, you corrupt the vision, and then you never get back to the vision. So I think the starting point of the live version of that conversation is to say, what is it that the teaching community and the young people and the business community would walk away with smiling and going, that was good. And don't let's get hung up on COVID right now. Once we understand what that is, it is quite possible, absolutely, that we may have to do something for November 2020, which is a variant on a theme. But November 2020 is also the first live opportunity we've got anyway, so it becomes effectively a stepping stone towards a longer goal. And what that is the subject of what we'd have to discuss through further. But as I said a moment ago, everything you've said is well within the realms of possibility. So we've got a great shooting gallery to go out there. The other thing I'd add is, of course, we've accidentally created an online business festival of innovation in this business insights thing here, which has caused us all slightly by surprise. So actually, the whole issue of creating the online side of what you said, there is absolutely no problem at all as we look forward, which is a conversation for us, which I think starts next week, I think, Jill, if I understand it, about what did we just do here, and actually probably too important. I've had a similar conversation with the South Gloss Council this week. There's something really quite special we've opened up here. We just don't quite understand what that is. Now, anything that we want to do in an online variant, its first port of call is probably that business insights discussion, but there's absolutely nothing wrong. There's a conversation to be had with the guys, doing the live stream as we speak, all this. Yeah. Because we can, certainly the Zoom, a live stream obviously involves tech and people and space, and I certainly wouldn't rule it out, but we'd have to have the conversation to rule it in. But creating a Zoom meeting like this coming out of the show would be as easy a thing to do as you want to even think about, because those who want to be on it at the show can be on it at the show, and those who don't. So I don't know how this works, but it's all possible. That's the thing I get out of this.
Yeah. Because the other thing that came up really that Julie Tegg raised was also this whole idea of stories from different businesses, which we sort of do in the Students in Business, because actually if they don't ask those questions, they sort of get told the story anyway. So, but it is this whole thing about what degree did you, or what did you do when you left school, and what happened then, and actually look what you're doing now. And I did a biology degree, trained as a chartered accountant, and then ended up doing systems development stuff for financial services. Not a mapped out route, you might say, but
that is exactly what is going on as we speak at Dean Close now. Motivate Your Generation. You've got Oliver plus 4 or plus 3 people who got into business at a very young age, and what is their journey, and that's what we're doing. That's exactly the story.
As Julie said, it'd be good to have somebody who left school at 6. There's some stories from somebody who left school at 16, somebody who left school at 18, somebody who did a degree, somebody who did a master's, because they've all come to the journey at different places.
So from the point of view of planning content for November and beyond, as you're familiar with, Jill, you get into the question of, is that so I'm being joined by the Doberman. Is that a presentation that is hosted on a live stage? Is it a presentation that is literally a presentation? Is it a workshop? Is it a theatre that we set up? We can do that if that's necessary. What the format is then starts feeding who we get involved and how we do it. And obviously it's got to work for everybody, exactly as Eve said. So one of the mistakes we've made over the years with Business Show is we've been too good at trying to second guess what will work for other people, going to a lot of trouble to set it up and finding we got the first premise wrong, and we've all wasted our time. So the important thing is to understand what the demand is, and then we'll put the energy into making that work.
Just following on from that slightly, I may be getting this wrong, because we've been very much focusing on the younger generation, if you like, and whether we should perhaps also think about people that might be retraining at a later life. And I certainly know of many instances where people perhaps moving into the NHS have taken a completely different career pathway, gone back to university, and I'm thinking of one individual in particular who's ended up as deputy matron, and said, if only I'd known this at 40 rather than 50. And it may be that because of the marketplace that will be prevailing in the years to come, and the economic climate, that there can be something around that for the business show as well, I think. And
certainly the Employment and Skills Forum tomorrow, because there was the motivating the younger generation today, and obviously the educational stuff that we're doing with the Students Meet Business tomorrow as well, is trying to be a little bit more cross-generational and not assuming that when you're talking skills, it's all around people that are leaving education. It is about that ongoing learning.
So the
agile, so yeah, totally.
So that is really important, Julie. And I think for me, we move into a skills gap conversation there, and we move into a human resource type conversation. And I think there's just a danger when we start building show content that we're going to conflate a young people agenda, which naturally leans towards, because it's the business and about, versus people who aren't falling into that category of young people. And I think both are really important, but they are also really different. Because if we talk to an older generation about the same thing, we'll be beginning to sound patronizing if we set it up in a way that we were talking to young people, and we don't want to do that. So I think yes, but let's be careful that we don't cross over our target audience.
Absolutely.
So, Eve.
Jill, sorry, great. So a couple of sort of light bulb thoughts came up there, Pete. So firstly, when we started working with Cheltenham festivals a few years ago as a partner, the lady there her role is the sort of education officer called Ali Moore. I don't know if you've met her at all, but
vaguely aware of the name. Yeah,
David, I know, would know her fairly well. One of the frustrations that the festivals had is that they, literature festival bringing 450 talks in 10 days, to the middle of town, and we've got all these primary schools nearby and 10 secondary schools in Cheltenham alone, let alone Gloucester, let alone going out a bit, and you get to Chosen Hill, you get to Cotswold School, and and then Cirencester, etc. I mean, there are a lot of schools around here. Yeah. And they basically said, that people could come free. They were really trying to grow their young audiences with this incredible offering and just get that sort of charitable benefit really out there. and they just got their take up was really flat, and they just couldn't understand it. They were thinking, what, you know, why aren't they coming? We're doing all of this. It's right here. This sounded a little bit like, you know, if we're in the town hall, we're right on the doorstep, you know. And it came down to, in the end, when they hired Ali and they put her across all the festivals and said, go and meet all the heads and find out why, and find out what is going to work, because surely these people and this thing need to be meeting in the middle and then having some good come of it. And it did come down to the resourcing models and levels in the schools. So you basically got a bunch of staff who are basically hired to teach, not to do teaching plus life hereafter. It's to teach and to do safeguarding duty and to be counsellors and to look after these prevent duty and what's going on at home and safeguarding and are they all right and catch up because this one's been ill. And the last thing most schools have is additional capacity within the staff who are sufficiently trained and confident to take kids away from the school, you know, out the back smoking, slipping out to do God knows what, you know, misbehaving, running in front of the road, anything happens to a child when they are off site with you, you know, the weight of everything falls on your head. So, and they're time and they're knackered. So what they had was an incredible will and a wish and just not enough resource to make that happen confidently for enough children on a sustainable basis. So Ali was then thinking, okay, roadshow, right, the mountain can't come to Muhammad, you know, can we come to you? So do we then bring the poet to do a workshop in the school? Because suddenly then it's not only the 20 kids who would have got taken in a minibus who get it, they're there for half a morning and every single child is going to get this at some point in the day. And suddenly the bang for buck went the other way, and you know they just pivoted. And I always remember her telling me that and thinking, you know, if we're building for a sustainable relationship, there, of course, the best thing is those kids or those young people come to the event. But actually, if with technology now, if some of that event can be brought to them, then we're much more likely to start to getting a relationship. And then when the relationship is there, word of mouth is there. Then, oh, last year that was really good from the year above. Yeah, that was really good, you know. And then they're more likely to actually even come of their own accord after school, like make their own way there. You know, they don't need to be doing it just because the school's bringing them and then someone has to be responsible for them. So that's my sort of last word on the young end. On the older ones, we've been working with our alumni network, sort of 8,500, you know, old girls, ranging to the age of 100. And of course, the challenge for women, all women, I would add, all women, is often returning to work after having had a family, or, you know, is it maternity leave, which might only have been a year or so, or is it actually a longer break? Perhaps you've had 5 years out or more if you've had more than one child, or you've moved because your husband moved and now you've had to move not for your purposes but for his purposes. So what we feel is that there is also there's that slight, those are older people, more mature, but they've maybe lost a bit of their mojo, or they've lost that certainty about where they are in the workforce of today. You know, are they going to be looked at as being a bit has-been, a bit old school, a bit, you know, it's the return to work. How do you get them out of economic inactivity and get them back on the horse and get employers to recognise that these people are not out to grass uniformly. They actually might have some different skills that aren't always suited to a CV that they didn't have when they were 5 years younger, because they're now a parent and they're used to juggling and multitasking and they've done all sorts of things which are more informal. So whether there's something around, you know, a session 4, or even just some perspectives from employers about that piece, maybe, question mark. And lastly, we've had Black Lives Matter protests in Cheltenham. We've got the BAME, you know, awareness, I think, really growing. And also people in terms of the accessibility of, you know, if they've got impaired mobility and things like that. And what we're finding is that actually technology, if there's the work from home ratchet effect where not everybody goes back to the office after this. There is a greater proportion of the workforce who people realise are just as productive if you let them work from home. Then where's that accessibility agenda, I wonder, in terms of the participation in the workforce of the years to come rather than the years that we've been in, because of what we've all learned from having to adapt to COVID.
Yeah, so we have new actually this year, we've got an inclusion forum, employment inclusion, which is more or less spot on what you've said. And also there's I don't know if you know Tracy Adams, runs 10 to 2, but she's about returning to work. And the last couple of shows we've run a thing called Recruiting Outside the Box, where we've avoided the classic recruitment offices, but gone for and we've done some recruitment of ex-military coming out and exactly return to work after children and a number of things. And so a panel of people who are recruiting from specific places. So any of those we could certainly pick up and develop. I think there's, again, we're just dusting around this area of those people who either are or want to be or can be physically at the show and those who can't. And I think there is something around the digital connection side of that. And I hear that. And after this, I think Jill and I will probably have a conversation about that. Obviously, it does take away from the body language and the experience of being on the ground, but clearly there are benefits as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something come out of that. That'll be some of the learns we've got coming out of Business Insights as well. In respect, just going back for a moment to your conversation, what you were saying about the youngsters, it's an interesting one. My wife is a primary school teacher and now a SEND coordinator in Matson in Gloucester. So, as a family, we're well familiar with this conversation. And actually, in my own mind, that's a little bit of why we wanted to do this session we're all sat on now, because this gave us a chance on the Zoom platform, on the Insights principle, of actually saying, so what is this? Because again, we're back to supply and demand. And occasionally I will say to Janet and talk about things we're dealing with. And actually, funny enough, cyber has been a great conversation because we're very embedded in cyber world and the stuff there with NCSC and GCHQ and the rest of it. And of course, as you'll be well aware, that's a real vulnerability around schools. I mean, private and secondary schools, less so because you've got a greater need to be on top of it because of the age and capability of children and the resources may be there. But if you go down to state primary level, you've got some really major vulnerabilities going on there. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked on the cyber there, but the issues are the same. It's about resourcing and it's about availability. And there's been a conversation we've been having in the cyber world about saying, if we're going to have a meaningful conversation, it's got to be controlled by supply and demand at the school end. Because if it's not, this conversation will never happen. It will just be a few polite conversations, but it won't come. And it's the same about inclusion into the business world. So it is about understanding what the schools need and want out of this, what they can. If my experience of this is if you offered somebody £1 million and suddenly people would work very hard to achieve it because there is a clear takeaway, and quite often resource restrictions can mask a dialogue about something that actually, if something is in demand, the resources will be made available, and actually get that around the other way. If the resources aren't available to do it, you have to question whether what you're doing is worth the value of to it. And that's the core question, and that's why we wanted to have this conversation, because if we can find a way of delivering something that's got the value to the school sector in a way that fits, obviously, with the business model and the product we've got, then that's what we're after, and that's what we want to put the time and energy into. That's why we're here. That makes sense.
Put in a couple of thoughts here. For me, one of the key things for young people is reassurance in two kind of ways. One is that there is going to be a job market for them.
Yes.
The businesses are not shutting down, as it were, at young people because they're having to contract and rationalise and all the rest. So anything that actually shows that there is still a vibrant market for young people is going to reassure and help. And the second area I think of reassurance is locally. You mentioned cyber there. so many of our young people leave once they've left school. They go off and train somewhere else and then go out of Gloucestershire. So anything that shows that there's going to be a dynamic future for Gloucestershire, which there is, Cyber Park et al., Gloucestershire 2050 vision, etc., those sorts of things, to say that there's not just a reassurance for young people in general, but there's reassurance for people here in this part of the world.
I mean, that's interesting. And by the way, David, it's good to see you again after I don't know how many decades.
Yeah, how are you? 40 years later.
You came up on the screen, I go, oh my word, deja vu, Tony Sims and a few other people. But anyway, let's not go there. Yes, I mean, it's funny and it's great that you say that, and you're absolutely right. The other side of that story that we get when I'm talking to the Sinam community or whoever, they are screaming, absolutely screaming the walls down for skills shortages. Where's the next generation? It's all very well building these businesses, but how are we going to populate them? The whole dynamic of why people come to, why people live in Gloucestershire, it's the right thing, what stage in their career. So, I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm involved in about 1 million conversations across sectors and things, and I hear one person's story and I hear another person's story, and I'm thinking, wow, that's great. But that means I have those pictures, and I'm very aware that those individuals are, if not in complete isolation, in pseudo-isolation. So the ability to tell that story in Gloucestershire right now, for all the reasons you've just mentioned, is huge. The question is how we do it in a way that is going to be effective. And I guess that's our challenge, and that's our job, and that's why we're all here.
So Pete, I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, sure.
I guess my question is, how do we wrap this up and what do we want to do next?
Well, I think from our perspective, I mean, the sense I get clearly is there is a demand, however we want to say it's quantified or blocked or whatever it is. I think what I'm keen to understand is how we can create content. Obviously, the great thing about live events and live shows is it really brings the conversation down to earth. It says at a date and a time, we're going to have to go live in a room with something, whether it's online, whether it's live, whether it's actors, whether it's a panel. So using that tool in this conversation, it's saying, look, if the next time we're live with a show, if we discount South Gloucestershire for this conversation, is in November, then you can plot a critical path back from the 18th of November that says, in order to deliver something meaningful, when do we have to do it, who's involved, and how does it happen? And my concern, I have too many times gone and created something that hasn't been right because I've not had the right people in the conversation. So to get to the answer of the question that you've just asked, Jill, I need to have some sense of who and from where, not even necessarily just people on this call, but other people maybe as well, would want to feel invested in that, in constructing something there. And if we can get those people together in a sensible way on a time efficient Zoom call, whatever it is, and start coming up with some plans, then it can give us something to go at and something to build.
Okay, well, I think probably what I need to run through with you a bit more of the detail of what we discussed before you arrived.
Surely.
I think it would probably be useful if people on the call could document their thoughts and drop me an email as to what they think might be the opportunities or what the key things that they would like the show to pan.
Are you happy to coordinate that process, Jill? That would be much appreciated from my end.
And then we'll feedback, and then I think we're probably going to need another call, aren't we? I suspect would seem to me to make sense in maybe a few weeks' time, and then play back some ideas and then see which have got the best legs, as you say.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I don't want to take out people's resource and time that if it's not going to be efficiently spent.
No, yeah.
So it's a case of finding out A, direction, and B, who feels that there's some legs in this.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just mention one more thing here, which is that Eva and I are part of a Cheltenham schools group, and I'd be very happy to go out to my colleagues in all the secondary schools of Cheltenham to get some feedback.
Okay.
That would be fabulous, David. Absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
And I think prior to you immediately doing that, maybe if you and I have a conversation on the side at some point, because obviously there are a number of people other than who are just on this call around us who do have a passion about this. And if we could get a sense of the question you're asking of those schools, then we can also get a sense of what we need in terms of the feedback in order to make some ground. But that would be fab, David. Thank you.
Yeah, let's have a conversation. That'd be good.
Good, brilliant. Jill, we'll have emails because we've got the registrations, haven't we? So
yeah, that's all fine. Yeah.